Hey guys, so in today's video, I'd like to share with you exactly how I go about finishing tracks quickly and efficiently. This is in response to last week's poll. I asked you guys what best describes your biggest struggle with music production. And not surprisingly, finishing tracks was the clear winner. So let's chat about that. But overall, this video is about productivity because I think that what most often prevents us from finishing tracks is just getting bogged down in the process of creating them. It takes too long, it gets frustrating, and you end up just giving up. The spare time that I have to actually sit down and compose music is really precious, it's limited, and that's the case for most of us. I know a lot of you have families to take care of. Many of you have, full-time jobs and other responsibilities. And so the question is always like, how do you make the most of that hour or two that you can carve out of your busy schedule and actually get a track done? So depending on the genre that I'm working on, it usually doesn't take me much more than a couple of hours to get a track written, mixed, mastered, and ready to go. So I'm going to show you exactly how I get that done every single time, and we're going to write a little checklist together. And we're going to use an example of a track from idea to finished mix. And stick around to the very end of this video because I'm going to share one bonus tip that above all will make the biggest difference to your productivity. So let's start a little checklist here. Number one is obviously coffee. Okay, got that done. Number two, what's the plan? So this step is crucial, and a lot of people ask me whether before I sit down and do I have an idea, like in my mind, of what I'm going to write before I actually start writing, and the answer is absolutely yes. I always go in with a couple of reference tracks in mind. I always start my days knowing whether I'm going to write a lo-fi hip-hop track or a documentary underscore or an epic orchestral trailer. There's always a plan. I used to have this absolutely terrible habit of just sitting down and just staring at my screen waiting for divine intervention. There seems to be this notion that part of being a producer or composer is that you're supposed to be inspired throughout every single moment of the process, and that's just not exactly my reality. I mean, for me, inspiration is often just a fleeting moment. For me, it's something that usually hits me when I'm listening to a reference track or maybe watching a video. And it's what gets me motivated to first just sit down and start the process. But most of what I do is just work. It's methodical, and sometimes it's even tedious. And that's the nature of being an artist. You've really just got to embrace that process. So I do have a plan for today. I feel inspired to write some lo-fi hip-hop. I've been listening to a few inspiration tracks to get me in the right headspace. Got my little Spotify playlist here. So I'm crossing number 2 off the list. So what's next? Number 3, get your tools in order. This step kind of reminds me of when Bob Ross would start picking his color palette before he started painting, because he always had an idea of what he was going to paint before he actually started, right? And most importantly, because his whole shtick was, getting a painting done quickly, he had all the tools he needed within arm's reach. He was always really well prepared going in, and I think that you have to approach composing in the exact same way. We've got to remove the obstacles that stand in the way between having an idea in our heads and actually putting it down. So that might mean having a template. That might mean, choosing the types of libraries that you want to use ahead of time. In my case, I have a very, very basic template together here. I've got a few libraries that I know that I want to use for this session, and I also have a few folders where I keep like my favorite swells and risers and various types of transition effects. I really don't want to waste any time trying to find these sounds. They're all just one click away from me, so get organized before you start the writing process. It's really important. Number 4, the main ingredients. So this is where I come up with just the basic idea for the track. It's usually just a handful of layers in an 8-bar loop. I'll allow myself to make some adjustments and do some processing on the sounds. So maybe a bit of reverb or compression here and there. But I do not allow myself to get caught up in the mixing process just yet. This is a step where I'm just throwing ideas at the wall and I'm just going to see what sticks. For me personally, this is always the most time-consuming and challenging part of the whole process, but it's also the most enjoyable. Once the basic idea is there, everything else just kind of falls into place. So here's my basic loop. Number 5, arrange the track. Oftentimes, this literally just means copy pasting the loop across the arrangement view in Logic and removing or adding to parts of that loop where I'd want it to sound like an intro, the chorus, or the breakdown, and so on. And once I've structured the arrangement for this track, I'm ready to move on to the final stage. Number 6, bells and whistles. So this is where I get into the nitty-gritty and add in all the little details, and this step also includes the fine-tuning of the mix. So this is where I'm going to focus on adding all the transition effects, and then I'll get into micro details, like for example chopping out little sections of the drums and the percussion tracks to create more dynamics and interest, or adding little filter sweeps into certain instrument groups. I'll often add some textural and ambient layers. Anything to prevent listening fatigue. I want something interesting to happen every 4 to 8 bars in the track, and this is the step where I zone in on all those little details. So once I'm happy with all that, I'll do some final adjustments to the mix and master, and eventually I'll just call it a day. This is often, for me, the most tedious part of the process, but it's also the most satisfying and rewarding because we finally crossed the finish line. Okay, so what about that bonus tip? Well, this is all about making that personal sacrifice. And as extreme as that sounds, I really do believe that getting the most out of your productivity and actually getting those tracks finished is somewhat a matter of asking yourself whether you're really being honest when you say that I just don't have the time.
Who has the time? No one.
Now, trust me, I get it. Life is busy, but it's also important to ask yourself if there's things or activities or maybe even just some bad habits in your life that you can live without. I mean, we all have these indulgences. It could be too much TV, or it could be too much partying. Whatever it is, the truth is that for most of us, it's not so much that we don't have the time, it's that we don't make the time. And as soon as we start changing that narrative in our minds, then that's when things really start to happen. So that's just a little motivation for you, and I'll leave it there. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys, and make sure to check out the Production Music Academy if you're interested in leveling up your skill set and getting your tracks licensed. There is an enormous amount of content there that covers this process in much more detail, so that link is in the description below. Go check it out, and in the meantime, I will see you guys soon. Take care.